All right, today we're diving into a really detailed intelligence document. It's titled SIGINT Forensics, Western Subversion and Ukraine Profiteering Network. Now, this was authored by a Master Specialist E9, Henry Bryant Lanier Sr., who, according to the report, has a pretty extensive background. We're talking 34 years of experience in signal intelligence with the U.S. Army Signal Corps.
Right from the jump, the author's purpose is made crystal clear with this quote. You can tell this isn't meant to be just some dry analysis. The language here really frames the whole document as an urgent indictment, based on what he says he's found. It sets a very deliberate, very confrontational tone from the get-go.
So, to really get a handle on this complex report, we're going to walk through it in 5 key parts. First, we'll look at the author's urgent warning. Then, we'll get into the alleged network he claims is behind all this. After that, the playbook of tactics they supposedly used. Fourth, what the report calls the grand deceptions. And we'll wrap it all up with the author's direct call for accountability.
Okay, let's start with the big idea, the central thesis of the whole thing. The core argument here is that the conflict in Ukraine didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Instead, the author claims it's the final result of a systematic, decades-long subversion campaign that was orchestrated by a network of Western powers.
And absolutely central to his argument is a concept he's coined himself, Entente Cordiale 2.0. He defines this as a kind of modern, weaponized version of that old Franco-British alliance. He alleges that this new version is orchestrating hybrid warfare and global corruption, with Ukraine right at the center of it all as the main point of leverage.
So that leads us right to the next logical question. Who exactly is in this alleged network? Who does the author say is responsible for carrying out this campaign?
Well, the report names 4 main players. It claims the United Kingdom is in the driver's seat, with France providing a sort of multilateral cover using EU mechanisms. The European Union's 27 nations are described as the broader network for this subversion. And, pretty specifically, the author claims the Obama administration, between 2009 and 2017, was the one that orchestrated the 2014 Maidan coup.
Now, to give you a sense of the scale he's talking about, the report points to this figure, 134 billion euros in EU aid. But, and this is a huge but in his analysis, the author argues this number is really deceptive. He claims that aid is actually a cover for kickbacks, arms laundering, and something he calls demographic engineering.
So this brings us to the playbook itself. How was this all supposedly done? In this section, the author gets into the nitty-gritty of the core methods he claims to have uncovered through his SIGINT forensics.
Okay, the first method he alleges is financial subversion. According to him, debt is wielded as a kind of silent artillery. He makes the case that war is treated like an investment to create dependency, which then allows powerful financial interests to profit from the conflict. He also claims this tactic has really deep roots in British imperial history.
And to back up that point, the author lays out this historical timeline. He's basically arguing that the financial tactics we're seeing in Ukraine are nothing new. He tries to draw a straight line from England's great debasement way back in 1542, through the creation of the Bank of England to fund wars, all the way up to 2014, when he alleges IMF loans were used to trap Ukraine in debt.
The report then gets very specific, naming who it claims are the key beneficiaries of all this war profiteering. It points to major defense corporations like BAE Systems, Thales, and Rheinmetall, and it cites things like massive stock price increases and their key roles in procurement plans as evidence that they're making a fortune from the conflict continuing.
Now, the second major mechanism described is what the author calls demographic subversion. And this is a very, very serious claim. He alleges that the refugee crisis isn't just some tragic consequence of war, but actually an engineered demographic weapon. The alleged goal? To create a pool of what he calls commodified human capital ripe for exploitation.
To support this argument, the author cites 2024 data from the UNODC. This chart here shows the supposed breakdown of why Ukrainian refugees are trafficked. You see 49% for labor exploitation and 29% for sexual exploitation. The report uses this data to argue that there's a systematic trafficking pipeline that's actually a central part of the whole strategy.
Next up, the report dives into what it calls the grand deceptions. These are described as 2 huge psychological operations, or PSYOPs, that were designed to hide the network's activities and to manipulate information on a global scale.
The first one is what the author calls the fake COVID PSYOP. He alleges the entire pandemic was a manufactured event to launder trillions of dollars and roll out new systems of control. The second is what he calls the radio called the internet. He describes the mainstream internet not as a place for information, but as a broadcast system for elite deception used to just push fabricated stories.
You know, the author's tone throughout this report is just completely unsparing, and this quote gives you a perfect sense of it. Elected and appointed clowns siphon war billions to hide crimes, killing soldiers and civilians to bury the evidence. He uses language like this to directly accuse officials of what he calls governmental theft profiteering.
So after all these stark allegations, what does the author actually propose? Well, that leads us to the final section, a call for accountability. This is where he lays out his specific demands for what needs to be investigated and what action needs to be taken.
The report wraps up with 4 very specific demands. 1. Conduct official Army Regulation 15-6 investigations into the misuse of funds. 2. Court-martial the people he deems responsible under U.S. Code. 3. Declassify all intelligence on what he calls the Entente/Obama operations. And finally, 4. Reactivate Nuremberg-style tribunals to prosecute these alleged crimes.
So, to just boil it all down, here's the summary. The report alleges that there has been a coordinated 34-year-long subversion campaign run by a Western network. And according to the author, its entire purpose was to systematically engineer, prolong, and profit from the conflict in Ukraine using financial, demographic, and political tactics.
And that brings us to the end of our breakdown. What we have here is a detailed, and you could say alternative intelligence narrative, packed with specific claims and data points. So it really leaves us with a crucial question to think about. No matter what you think of its conclusions, what does a framework like this reveal about the nature of modern information warfare and the ongoing battle over narratives?